Now that Stardew Valley the board game is out, it seems like everyone is enjoying it quite a bit, especially those who love the video game. Despite being an adaptation, fans and reviewers all agree that it does a great job capturing the spirit of the source material in its mechanics and theme. Because its first print run is sold out, I still have yet to get my hands on a copy, but that being said, I can't help but wonder what other games could benefit from a board game adaptation. As we already know, Slay the Spire is an indie game that will be receiving its own cooperative board game later this year. For a digital card game with heavy deck-building mechanics, this seems like a no-brainer. But what other games could go the same route? There are plenty of board games based on video games already. Dark Souls has a tough-as-nails dungeon crawler game with unpainted miniatures. This War of Mine is a cooperative management simulation game pretty similar to the original. And even Portal has a family party game I've noticed on the shelves of my local game store. Likewise, there are plenty of video game and mobile adaptations based on existing board games, like Onirum, Sagrada, Small World, Catan. The list goes on and on. But today, I want to highlight 3 video games that don't have a board game counterpart yet, and could really benefit from one. Number 3, Armello. You'll notice right off the bat that I chose a lot of games that already have board game mechanics integrated into them, as these would hopefully be a lot easier to adapt into board games. For Armello, the whole game is basically a board game where you move an animal adventurer character across the board, capturing certain points, drawing cards, rolling dice for combat, and hopefully winning the game by taking out the corrupted king at the center of the board. What I like about this game is that there's multiple ways to win. Each game can be completely different in how you approach it. You might try and gather spirit stones, or increase your rot level, or wait until the king finally dies on his own and have the most prestige points to claim the victory. Having multiple paths to victory would add a lot to the replayability, but the number one thing I like about this game that would make it really easy to adapt into a board game is that pretty much every single mechanic is something that can be represented in real life. Sure, there's enemy AI when you're playing against the computer, but as far as PvP, everything that's here would work. Now, there would be a lot of components. There would be a lot of dice and cards. The board would be very big. You could have miniatures for the characters, but pretty much everything could be one-to-one and function really well. And that's why I think Armello would work great as a physical board game. Number 2, Dicey Dungeons. This one is pretty similar to Slay the Spire. It's kind of a deck builder where you're going through different levels of a dungeon, and your abilities increase and level up as you go, and sometimes you discard abilities to make room for better ones. But a striking difference is that all of your abilities are triggered by dice rolling. And this is kind of the opposite to Armello, where I don't think there would be tons of components. In fact, it would just be a bag of dice and a bunch of cards, and this would work just fine. The tricky part would be adapting those video game elements, such as the enemy AI and the randomness, and figuring out how to best adapt those. I think this one would work really well as a solo experience, and maybe we need to see the Slay the Spire adaptation to kind of get a better feel for what works and what doesn't. But as long as you're rolling dice, triggering abilities, facing enemies, and maybe you could have a roll objective on those enemies to know what abilities they prefer triggering first. I recently got my hands on Dice Throne Adventures, and I think that game does a pretty good job of having roll objectives for the enemies, so you know exactly what the priority is on their attacks. And as long as you could add that to Dicey Dungeons, I think this would be really, really fun. And I love dice rolling games, so there might be a little bit of bias here. Tharsis. This game would work so well as a physical board game. I don't know why they haven't done it yet. Tharsis is a space survival game where you have a limited amount of food, resources, health, and your ship is constantly falling apart and you're trying to repair it, but you have a very limited amount of dice rolls. And it's pretty difficult, it's pretty hard, but it's so fun to try and figure out where your crew members should go, what tasks you should assign them to, what abilities to trigger, and press your luck with the dice rolls in the hopes of making it all the way to Mars. Most of the mechanics here I think would be pretty easy to adapt. There's a couple things that might need a deck of cards or something to simulate the randomness about what parts of the ship get broken or what science upgrades are available. But otherwise, I really, really hope the developers of Tharsis consider this because it would just be so fun, either as a solo or a cooperative game. So those are my picks, but please let me know what I missed. I'm sure there are a lot of games that would work really well as a board game or a card game. And for those lucky souls who did get a copy of Stardew Valley the board game, can I borrow your copy? That would be really great. Let me know. Okay, thanks, bye.